Good evening, everybody. I think we need another round of applause because I think we can safely say we haven't just experienced a masterclass, we've experienced a cultural, creatively rooted sermon of the non-denominational kind, because that was a clarion call for all of us. For those who don't know me, my name is Mazzi, and it's an absolute pleasure to be in conversation with Reni. And I am going to only ask a few questions, so more of the questions can come from all of you. As it said earlier, it's an open circle conversation. So, Reni, I just want to start with two phrases that really struck me: a living platform and also a place where the past and present can meet. And I think this is very much rooted in sort of African knowledge systems, how we think and how we do and how we express ourselves. So I want to ask you, why was it so important that it was both a living platform, not necessarily situated in one place or one location, and also why the past and present needed to be in dialogue?
I had seen so much. I had researched so much. I was overwhelmed, I have to say, by the depth of creativity and just what the culture had to offer across the continent. Nigeria alone is substantial, but the rest of Africa now became this huge thing, and it was so underrated. Our history was so underrated; it was almost erased. And I was like, what is the reason for this erasure? Like it didn't exist. I mean, you hear histories of several people, like you learn in school, but the history of Africa and the things that we did was neglected largely. And I looked at then what was happening today then, and I realized that there was such a paucity of depth in everything that I saw without really looking deeply. I saw a lot of stuff from all over the world but Africa, in people's homes, the way people dressed. And I was like, no, we need to revive so that we can populate today with what was so great about then. And then we can have enough to grow and show the world. Then we can be proud. So for me, it was like learning from the old to influence the new and then take us into the future as superpowers.
It's really interesting you say that, and I think that this raison d'être, for want of a better phrase, this idea of setting the agenda and learning from our past to take it forward. And also, you touched upon something just now in your answering of noticing there was a paucity of depth, even though you, as a Nigerian, as a very well-traveled Nigerian, knew that across the continent there was so much depth. There was a plethora. I mean,
yes.
It's like boiling the ocean.
You had to find it.
Yes, but
it was there.
It was there, and
yeah.
I think that's something that, as you will talk about it later when you go through the challenges. I think that idea of knowing there is so much to do, and there is so much to share, and there's so much to propagate, especially against this narrative of, here be lions. It's almost like the Plato quote, where that's what they said for everything that was beyond Egypt. And I want to ask you about this because it's almost like, as well as creating Alara, you have grown to become a cultural diplomat for the continent, a Pan-African one at that. And I want to ask how that challenge has manifested itself. Both, you touched upon it in your keynote, in your masterclass, of convincing retailers, convincing brands overseas, whether it's, we all know what, the international brands that are stocked in Alara, from, say, an Off-White, a Christian Louboutin, a Del Pozo, to be side by side with an Awa Mete, to be side by side with other Nigerian or other African brands that we have. And I want to ask that cultural diplomacy, if you can share with the audience, how did you navigate? This is now going to be a multi-level execution program. It's not just a question of let's gather everybody in this beautifully designed David Adjaye building and go.
It was twofold. I mean, like I said in my keynote, I went plan in hand, all sorts of documents, basically to enlighten people. You have to understand that, like I'm really tiny, and I'm knocking on doors of really big brands, and I'm telling them how great this place in Lagos was going to be. They didn't know me from Adam. I had to force my way through many doors. You know, I had to beg people to get me into rooms. But I was convinced that I would find like minds, that they will understand the beauty and the value that we brought. And it worked, because it is valuable. That's actually the fact. It is a different point of view. There's a newness, and it was very exciting at the time. And people became intrigued about how this could be. And so we had that. Yeah, we did have some problems with some people who didn't get it. They probably still don't get it, but we don't care. We've moved on. But it was hard work for me. I did this for 3 years, literally. And I would go back to Paris every fashion week, literally. And I would get doors shut in my face, but I understood what I had to do. And I understood the value of what I brought to the table. And eventually people did as well. And I think people still do, and they find it super intriguing and interesting.
I have to say that idea of constantly and elegantly rebuffing rejection, I say this as someone who's not Nigerian, I do think it's a Nigerian superpower, and it should be bottled, of just not caring, because you know I'm going to smash down that door one way or another. And I think it's really important, and even what you just said now of the not caring afterwards, because you're a proven concept.
Yeah, I mean, also because it should be a privilege it should be a privilege to want to work with young African creatives. The freshness, you know, what they bring to the table, it might be raw and rugged, but it's real. And I think that's what a lot of the world is missing, is that realness. And so for me, it was important that they saw that value. But also, I'll take your question. I don't know if you were going to ask me another question, but I'll take it before you get there, which is that part of our concept was to put the young designers side by side with the most important designers of the world. And it was a brave decision, and I had to push for it. But the reason, it was twofold. It was because it would give us validation in this environment, but also because for the young designers, it helped them to learn what it took. A lot of designers at the time had never seen a Valentino dress. It would upgrade them in the sense of what to expect, what should look like. So I felt that it was twofold. It would help people in schools. They used to come in droves through Alara just to see the world. And that's why Alara became this window. So it wasn't just, yes, it was strategic in the sense that a lot of our customers, they were already buying these brands. But it was also important that we exposed a lot of our young artists and creatives to what that looked like. It was like going to a museum, you know, and seeing pieces, you know, that we go to museums to see. And I really liked that.
I think that's really important, but I also think it was two-way education, and I want to speak to that because you also touched upon it in your masterclass, this idea of people thinking they're only going to have an elevated experience if they get that visa or they have another passport and they travel abroad, and that's where I consume luxury out there, and when I come back home, not to expect it. And, you know, people talk about sort of decolonizing the academy, but I also think you almost decolonize luxury for many 1% client-based people here in Africa, of thinking that you can have that experience in a country that's in sub-Saharan Africa. You can have that experience in a majority black nation. You do not have to go elsewhere. And it's not that it's so disparate from your locale. And I want to ask you, I mean, was that also equally an interesting place to be in sort of decolonizing that preconceived ideas, whether they're historic, whether they're based on experiences that people may have had overseas?
It's a tough one. And the reason I say that is that we still have people who will not shop here, no matter what you do. They will go to Paris, no matter what you sell. So you still have that. But yes, I think for the people who became our customers, it was particularly favorable to them. Because when we went to get these pieces, we were thinking of ourselves, it was an Alara curation. We chose the brands, we chose the shapes, we chose the colors, we chose the craftsmanship based on our own ethos. So a lot of these brands were in our space on our own terms. So we chose the designs and the pieces based on that. So anybody who came into Alara would find something that fits them, something that was not narrow on the hips, something that you could wear to any of your traditional parties. Because honestly, you know that our aesthetic is different from a typical European aesthetic. So we didn't sell black dresses, and we don't sell a black dress. We will sell something super flamboyant, and because that suits our own customers.
I think that's something that, again, speaks to not following a playbook, because if you're following a playbook, the imitation comes in rather than the innovation.
Yes.
And I want to ask you about this notion of bringing contemporary Africa to the world. You touched upon it in the, I think, second to last slide. And obviously the two major activations that come to mind was Alara at the Brooklyn Museum, and also more recently, Alara X LACMA, where you have done a curate of pieces that have been in collaboration with creatives here, like I know there's an aromatic tote and other items. And I want to ask you, why was it so important in that intention of we are going to bring ourselves to these institutions, that it was very important to, A, partner with them, to create both a fora for our aesthetic landscape, our loci of concerns, to be consumed by other people in these locations. I just want to ask a little bit about why that was so pivotal.
The Brooklyn Museum in particular, we were beside the Africa Fashion Exhibition, which was something of a monument. It was important. It was one of the first times where Africa was shown on that level. It was important that we showed up beside that in a big way. I mean, we curated 100 brands from 25 countries in Africa. And it was a curation that was very specific. We wanted the best, to show the best of Africa, because the audience was very much actually a diasporic audience. And we know that the diaspora are connecting more with us here, much more than before. And we wanted stuff that they would see what we had was amazing, but also they would feel proud. And the connection with the diaspora was very important to us. But in the end, everybody came. Everybody came, and everybody really loved the stuff that we brought from Africa. And it proved to us that what we're making here is really special. And I think sometimes we forget that. And we are overshadowed by a lot of noise. And I really wanted to show that. So we did go overboard with Brooklyn. We really went to town, and we did very well. So in the end, it was successful in that it was successful in showing that there was a market for African luxury, but also that the idea of products having meaning and having depth was also super important to the person that was buying from a museum, as opposed to the person that was just buying from a shop. So those kind of things. I mean, for us, like I said in my keynote, I think it's important to understand that as Alara, we become something of a repository. We have a lot of knowledge. We do a lot of research about things that have happened. So we have a lot of knowledge. We tell stories. It's one of the things we do the most, because the stories help to bring the products to life. So I think those kinds of collaborations on platforms that stories are important to, that history is important to, will be where Alara will show up.
I think that's very important, because I think also when I think, again, right at the beginning of your talk, you spoke about, rather than waiting to be invited to the apocryphal table, to build a table that's befitting of us. But yes. I also think you flipped the script of, in true sort of traditional, this is going into sort of Nigerian ontology of being the host, you have also, in those two specific activations, invited others to your table that you have also built, which is both radical, exciting, and wonderful to be alive with that happening. But I want to speak a little bit about the challenges. You outlined them, and you were very elegant in outlining them. But I also want to ask a little bit deeply about this idea of creating in a space that doesn't necessarily have all of the infrastructure, and also collaborating, partnering with creatives who may not necessarily, I think the best way of putting it, necessarily realize all of the back office and the back end that requires to both ideate their dreams, hopes, and ambitions, and also maintain. And I want to ask you about why was it really important for you to almost treat Alara like the family creative compound, where creatives can come in, and it's almost like not just as the CEO, creative director, you listed everything from advising an artist to also directing what next dish should be, the plat du jour at Knock. How has that kind of ambidextrousness been for you in terms of the challenges? Without being so facetious, how do you do it? Because that kind of level of dexterity would be exhausting for many, Nigeria happening ad nauseam. And I want to ask you a little bit about that in specificity of also educating others so you can carry along and create something that sustains beyond many of our lifetimes.
Yeah, I think I have studied human nature quite a lot. I'm old enough. And I understand things deeply. I understand that everybody that comes to our platform is coming with one struggle or the other. And mostly what I have understood is one of not being good enough. And I'm not sure why culturally that happens a lot to us. I think it has a lot to do with a society. There's a lot of ageism, there's a lot of classism. There's a lot of things that actually prevent people from being open and living their very best lives. And I'm very conscious of that. I'm very conscious that everybody that comes on our platform or that I come in contact with deserves a chance, no matter who they are. It could be a cleaner, it could be anyone. So in Alara, we are very much a family. We operate like that with people who work for us. We operate like that with people who join us in this compound. And that's why I say we are of service. It really is the truth. And we are of service not just to people, the 1% or people who can buy the biggest stuff, but to everybody. It's a passion of mine to bring the best out of everybody that we encounter. And it can be exhausting, but not so much if you see results. And so for me, you will be disappointed. That's life. But it's a great honor and a pleasure that I have the opportunity to have a platform that can improve people.
And I think that idea of improving people, you touched upon it at the end of your, this is my last question, so everybody, you would be indeed invited into the circle. And you touched upon it, that being of service and leadership that is both resilient and also ties in with all that you've learned in this last 10 years, both at the helm and obviously the years that preceded, because many here might not know that for many years you also ran a very, very successful furniture and design practice prior to actually...
Still do.
Still do, prior to Alara. So a lot of people might think, oh, it all started with Alara. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's very easy to be drawn in, excited by the success, by the shiny. But when you spoke about leadership and you spoke about service, and you also touched upon, it's great, we have done 10 years, we are still standing, we've become a global benchmark, we've become a cultural lodestar, we've become an aspiration point, we've become a landmark in a city that is the most populous on the continent. But I think what you were when you said something about education and the next 10 years and the next milestones, because you've achieved so many, and I would really like, as we draw our conversation to a close here, for you to touch upon those future milestones that you, with the belief, agility, resilience, and grit, will achieve.
Yeah, it's a great question. What does the future of Alara look like? I've taken the last 10 years as a learning curve, and I think that it's now that Alara will blossom. And it's a great moment for it to blossom, and it coincides with a lot happening in our city. So I think that for us, global growth, traveling and exposing the wonderful creatives that we already started to do with Alara World will continue. But I think that the most important thing for me, the more important thing for me now is to think about how we maintain what we have started to get to. How do we, this momentum, how do we keep it? How do we keep it from falling down? And I think that that has a lot to do with education. And I think education on all levels. I think it's important to understand that anybody can learn. And today you can learn in 3 months. You can learn, because I mean the natural creativity that we have needs to be honed and it needs to be bolstered. And I think the art schools, and I did say, I don't think I said it on my keynote, but it's like a pyramid. And everybody's climbing the top. But the base is really shallow. There's nothing there because there are no schools, like there's nothing solid there. And I think that that's where we start. And I also understand that we need learning that people also find accessible. So it's not that you have to go to an art school, but you can take a few courses. And for people to feel very easy about taking so many courses, because honestly, you can do it really quickly. And I think that will be great support for the future of our creativity.
So much. I think that's really exciting because, as you also touched upon in your talk, there's so much creativity beneath most people. Most people have a secret superpower. So the fact that you'll be enabling that and creating it in a number of in the numerous fora that you have is really exciting. So thank you so much for conversing with me.